Some miracles become famous. They shape entire generations, inspire pilgrimages, but others are hidden, buried in convent walls, silenced by obedience, and almost erased from history. This is the story of one such miracle. It begins with a woman most people have never heard of, Sister Elisabetta Rideli. Born in poverty, raised in faith, she chose the path of religious life with one simple desire: to love God and serve others. She never wrote about herself, never sought the spotlight, and never tried to be remembered. And yet, her life became the stage for something extraordinary. In the winter of 1924, Elisabetta lay dying. She was only 26 years old. Blind, paralyzed, unable to speak, the doctors had given her only hours to live. For the sisters around her, it seemed the end had come. The infirmary was heavy with silence, the kind of silence that waits for death. But that night, something happened. What took place in that small room would not only defy medicine, but it would also shake the faith of everyone who witnessed it. It would ignite awe in some, fear in others, and ultimately lead to decades of enforced silence. Why? Because what was revealed that night was not only a miracle of healing, it was also a message so piercing, so uncomfortable, that the church itself asked Elisabetta to keep quiet. She obeyed, as a humble nun must, and for the rest of her long life, she carried the secret in silence. Very few people know this story. Even fewer understand its meaning. And yet, for those who have uncovered it, the question remains: what was so urgent that heaven would intervene? And why would the church want it hidden? Tonight, we'll journey into the forgotten life of Sister Elisabetta. From her childhood struggles in a poor Italian home, to the quiet devotion that marked her youth, to the years of suffering that nearly crushed her body, and the single night that changed everything. A miracle, a warning, and a secret almost lost to history. To understand the mystery of Sister Elisabetta, we must begin long before her illness, long before the convent walls closed around her. We must return to Arcore, a modest town near Milan, Italy, at the very end of the 19th century. It was February 10, 1897, when a little girl named Elisabetta Rideli was born. Her family, like so many in Lombardy, was poor. Her father was a mason, his hands scarred and hardened from years of laying stone and mortar. He built homes for others, yet often struggled to keep food on his own family's table. Her mother was a woman of quiet strength, managing the household with courage, raising the children with discipline and faith. The Ridelis had many mouths to feed, and Lisetta, as Elisabetta was affectionately called, grew up surrounded by brothers and sisters. From the start, she seemed different. Where other children chased games in the street, Lisetta gravitated toward prayer and service. By the time most children her age were still sleeping, she was awake, slipping through the misty alleys of Arcore to join the parish priest on his early rounds. She would accompany him as he carried Holy Communion to the sick. Imagine that small figure, barely 10 years old, walking beside the priest, her steps steady, her heart already turned toward God. At school, Lisetta was known for diligence and skill, though she was not destined for books and scholarship. Her teacher placed her near the pulpit, giving her small sewing and lace-making tasks. Her fingers, nimble and patient, learned to stitch with precision. But Lisetta's education did not end with needle and thread. Her parents gave her another inheritance, the example of faith. Her father, despite his worsening disability, practiced charity even in hardship. Her mother, too, was known for generosity, helping neighbors in need. From them, Lisetta learned that love was not a theory, but an action. One memory in particular stayed with her for life. It was the day of her first communion. After Mass, her parents took her to the nearby shrine of Madonna del Bosco, dedicated to the Virgin Mary. Before the statue of the Madonna, Lysetta felt a peace unlike anything she had ever known. She could not explain it, but she carried that sense of nearness to Mary with her forever. In that moment, a hidden bond was forged, one that would later shape the most extraordinary chapter of her life. Even as a child, Lysetta practiced charity in her own small ways. When an old woman in her town, abandoned and forgotten, fell ill, Lysetta became her faithful companion. She visited her, comforted her, and remained at her side until the woman's final breath. Her teenage years were marked by long hours of work. She embroidered lace, sometimes late into the night, her tired fingers earning just enough to help feed her brothers and sisters. Alongside other young girls, she walked miles to reach workshops, and together they prayed the rosary and sang hymns as they worked. From this rhythm of work, prayer, and charity, Lysetta's character was formed. Humble, generous, deeply faithful. She did not yet know where it would lead, but her heart was already prepared for a greater calling. And soon, that calling would arrive. But with it would come struggle, a conflict between her family's need and God's invitation. A choice that would wound her parents, test her resolve, and shape the rest of her life. As Lysetta grew into a young woman, her hands remained busy with lace and embroidery, but her heart longed for more than the rhythm of thread and needle. Each day she crossed paths with the Marcelline sisters, the congregation founded in Lombardy in the 19th century. Their presence struck her. Women devoted not to marriage or family, but to prayer, education, and service. Lysetta would watch them pass in their simple habits, carrying an air of serenity. Something stirred within her. She wanted to be like them, a mother to those who had none, a servant of Christ who gave her whole life to love. The call was clear, but the path was not. Her family was already burdened. Her father, once a strong mason, had become increasingly disabled, unable to support the household as he once had. The few coins Lysetta earned from lacework were no luxury, they were survival. If she left, who would help keep food on the table? One evening, when Lysetta gently spoke of her desire, his words cut like a blade. "Do you want to abandon us, Lysetta?" She froze. Abandon them? The thought tore at her. She loved her family. She knew their needs. And yet, she also felt the unmistakable pull of God's call. Between filial love and divine vocation, her heart was torn in two. The tension lasted for months. Every time she raised the subject, her father's refusal was sharp, his pain visible. She prayed, she waited, she hoped. And still, she could not let go of the desire God had planted within her. Her conviction only deepened when, one day, a Marcelline sister asked her directly, "Would you like to become one of us?" Without hesitation, Lysetta replied, "Oh yes." It was as though a dam had burst. The words escaped her with a strength that surprised even herself. For the first time, she felt the courage of decision, a courage that would not fade. By 1916, her resolution was firm. She planned to enter the convent on November 1st, the Feast of All Saints. But history intervened. Europe was engulfed in the First World War. Two of her brothers had been sent to the front. The family's needs were greater than ever. Her parents forbade her departure, and Lysetta, bound by obedience, had to wait. Yet she did not surrender her hope. She spoke gently, persistently, to her family, reminding them that this call was not her own invention, but something greater. Her perseverance softened even her father's heart, and at last, in 1917, with her parents and sister by her side, Lysetta crossed the threshold of the Marcelline convent. Her heart pounded as she walked through the gates. Her father, his face heavy with grief, whispered one last plea. "Come home, I beg you. How will we manage without you?" Tears filled Lysetta's eyes. She clung to him and whispered back, "Daddy, please, let me go." He relented, but the wound remained. When she received the habit and became Sister Elisabetta, her father was absent. The bond seemed broken. It was the price of her vocation, a price paid in sorrow. Within the convent, Elisabetta threw herself into service with joy. She taught catechism, cooked, cleaned, cared for children, and assisted in the sacristy. She was tireless, radiant in her dedication. She had found her place, her true home. But destiny was not finished with her. Even as she flourished in her new life, a shadow began to spread over her health. At first it was only fatigue, then a cough, then blood. Small signs that would lead to years of suffering beyond what anyone could imagine. The call she had followed with such courage was about to demand even more than she had ever given. For a time, Sister Elisabetta lived as though her heart had found its resting place. Within the walls of the Marcelline convent, she flourished. She was tireless in her service, teaching catechism to children, preparing the altar for Mass, assisting in the kitchen, comforting the lonely. She seemed to have endless reserves of energy and joy. But joy, as she would learn, can be tested in the furnace of suffering. One day, as she bent over her work, a sudden sharp pain seized her chest. Blood rose in her throat. The sisters rushed to her aid, and doctors were summoned. The diagnosis was grave. Tuberculosis, a disease that ravaged lungs, claimed countless lives, and in those days offered little hope of cure. At first, Elisabetta accepted the rest prescribed to her. But rest was agony. For a soul built to serve, confinement was unbearable. She longed for the rhythm of work and prayer with her community. Instead, she was sent to the Marcelline house in Cernusco, reserved for the sisters too sick to continue their duties. There, the decline accelerated. The coughing fits returned with violence. Hemorrhages left her weak and pale. Her once bright eyes dimmed. The illness spread its grip mercilessly. By 1923, the situation had worsened beyond repair. Elisabetta's eyesight faded until she was completely blind. Soon after, paralysis began to set in. Her hands, once so quick with needle and thread, grew stiff and lifeless. Her legs refused to move. Then came silence. The voice that had once prayed aloud, sung hymns, and taught children fell mute. She could no longer form words. She lay in bed, a prisoner inside her own body. The sisters who visited her could scarcely bear the sight. Once so lively, she was now a shadow, reduced to faint breaths and whispered prayers in her heart. The doctors, too, gave little comfort. They tried instruments, treatments, remedies, each one more humiliating for a woman of her modesty. Tubes, clamps, and daily procedures became routine. To a sensitive soul like Elisabetta, the invasions were not just painful but degrading. In the silence of her room, she whispered a plea in her heart. "Lord, I offer you everything, but no more humiliation, I beg you." The community placed her in a small chamber near the chapel, so at least she could hear the faint echo of prayer through the walls. For her, each sound of the liturgy became a lifeline. Each murmur of the Mass was a thread holding her to God. And yet, the nights were long. Every breath was labor, every movement agony. Day by day, her body grew weaker, and death seemed near. The doctors themselves admitted there was nothing left to do. They predicted only hours remained. Imagine the scene. A 26-year-old woman, blind, paralyzed, voiceless, unable to swallow, racked with tuberculosis and meningitis. The sisters kept vigil, preparing for her passing. They prayed the rosary beside her bed, ready to commend her soul to God. But Elisabetta herself was not resigned. Deep in her broken body, she held on to something the others could not see, a strange expectancy. It was as if she were waiting for an appointment, as if her soul knew that this suffering was not the end. One of the sisters would later say that even in her weakness, Elisabetta seemed to radiate a fragile hope, like a candle about to be extinguished, but refusing to let its flame die. By the beginning of 1924, she was clinging to life by the thinnest thread. The sisters counted her breaths, wondering if each one would be the last. And yet, as they watched her body break down, heaven was preparing something no one could have imagined. For in the silence of her suffering, a presence was drawing near. The winter of 1924 pressed heavily on the convent at Cernusco. Inside the infirmary, silence reigned. The sisters moved quietly through the corridors, whispering prayers for the dying. In one room, all eyes were on a frail young woman, only 26 years old, whose body had been broken by disease. That woman was Sister Elisabetta Ridali. Blind for over a year, mute for weeks, paralyzed and unable to swallow, she was now beyond the reach of medicine. Even the doctor, once skeptical and dismissive, had resigned himself. It is a matter of hours. The sisters prepared for death. They rotated through her chamber, keeping vigil so she would not die alone. Candles flickered faintly. The rosary was prayed in hushed tones. Outside, the world went on, unaware that within these walls, a secret of heaven was about to unfold. One evening, as Elisabetta lay half-conscious, something stirred. She felt it before she heard it, a presence in the room. The sound of light footsteps, a warmth near her bedside, and then a voice. Gentle, tender, unlike any she had ever known. She called the figure simply La Signora, the lady. This mysterious visitor bent down and consoled her in her suffering. Elisabetta, astonished to feel her lips move after weeks of silence, whispered, "Signora, how good you are." The lady encouraged her to offer her pain to God. And then she gave a promise. "Pray, trust, and hope. I will return on the night of the 22nd to the 23rd. Elisabetta, weak and confused, misheard. She thought the lady meant February 2nd to 3rd. When that night passed without event, she wept in despair. She did not come. It must be because I was not good enough. The sisters, skeptical, tried to comfort her. They thought it the rambling of a mind clouded by fever. No one truly believed. But then came the night of February 22nd, 1924. The doctor had been blunt. She would not survive until morning. The sisters crowded near her bed, waiting for the inevitable. Midnight passed. The air was heavy, the stillness suffocating. Elisabetta's breaths grew shallow. It seemed her final hour had come. And then it happened. Suddenly, her lips opened. Her blind eyes lit up with life. She stared toward the corner of the room and cried out with a voice that rang through the silence. "La Signora, La Signora." The sisters froze. For the first time in weeks, she spoke. Her face, once ashen, now glowed with joy. Before her stood the Virgin Mary. In her arms, she carried the child Jesus. But something was different. The child was not radiant or smiling. His eyes brimmed with sorrow. Tears streamed down his small face. Elisabetta trembled. "He is crying. But why is he crying? Is it because of my sins?" The Virgin's voice was tender, but solemn. "He weeps because he is not loved enough. Not sought, not desired enough even by those consecrated to him." The words pierced Elisabetta's heart like fire. She wanted to comfort the child, to wipe away his tears, but her paralyzed body held her prisoner. Tears ran down her own cheeks as she whispered, "I am useless. I have done nothing for 2 years. Take me to heaven, I beg you." But Mary shook her head. "No, you must stay. You must say what you have seen and heard." Elisabetta hesitated, filled with doubt. "But who will believe me? I am ignorant. I can no longer speak. Who will believe me?" Mary's eyes, filled with sorrow, met hers. Elisabetta pleaded, "O Madonna, give me a sign." And then the Virgin gave her the answer, "I give you back your health." A burst of light seemed to envelop the room. Elisabetta felt searing pain shoot through her body, and then, suddenly, life. Her lungs expanded. Her limbs moved. Her voice returned. She rose from the bed, fell to her knees, and cried out, "I am healed. I am healed. The Madonna has healed me." The sisters rushed in, expecting her final gasp instead. They found her kneeling, radiant, her blind eyes suddenly clear. She stood, walked, spoke, even asked for bread. She devoured it with joy, after months of being unable to swallow. The infirmary, once filled with sorrow, now erupted in cries of awe. "Miraculous, miracle." The news spread quickly. Bells rang through Cernusco. Villagers gathered at the convent, desperate to see with their own eyes. Even the doctor, summoned in haste, stood speechless before her. Only hours earlier, he had declared her lost. Now she stood before him, healthy, smiling, alive. This hardened atheist left the room transformed, unable to explain what he had witnessed, but unable to deny it. Through it all, Elisabetta repeated the words entrusted to her. Jesus weeps because he is not loved enough, not sought, not desired enough, even by those consecrated to him. She traced the tears in the air with her hands, as if she could still see them streaming from the child's face. Her voice, once silenced, rang with new strength. A mission had been given to her, and yet this mission would soon meet resistance. For even as the convent celebrated, her superiors began to fear. Fear of frenzy, of misunderstanding, of dangerous enthusiasm. And so, the miracle that had shaken an entire town would be buried under an order of silence. But for now, in that February night, the convent stood in awe. Death had been turned to life. A secret of heaven had touched the earth. And Sister Elisabetta, once thought lost, now bore a message meant for the world. For days after that February night, the convent in Cernusco could speak of nothing else. The sisters whispered in awe of what they had seen. A woman blind and dying, now radiant and whole, a healing no doctor could explain. Villagers flocked to the doors, eager to glimpse the miraculata, the sister miraculously healed by the Madonna. Bells rang, prayers rose, songs of thanksgiving filled the air. But joy was soon met with caution. The superiors of the congregation, worried about uncontrolled enthusiasm, acted swiftly. They feared that gossip might distort the facts, that rumors could spiral beyond control. They knew how fragile reputation was in the church, how quickly suspicion or superstition could discredit even a genuine grace. Their decision was firm: silence. Elisabetta was ordered not to speak of what she had seen or heard. No written testimony, no public sharing, no recounting of the Virgin's words. The miracle was acknowledged, but not proclaimed. For Elisabetta, the order cut deep. The Virgin had told her clearly, "You must stay. You must say what you have seen and heard." Now her obedience to the church seemed to demand the opposite. Two voices echoed in her soul, the command of heaven and the command of her superiors. And yet, she chose humility. She obeyed. From that moment on, Elisabetta carried her secret in silence. When people came asking questions, she smiled but offered nothing. When sisters pressed her for details, she lowered her gaze. The story that could have made her famous, she buried in quiet surrender. Her life returned to simplicity. She was transferred to the Marcelline house on Via Quadrano in Milan. There she resumed small tasks: sewing, embroidering, teaching young girls needlework, guiding students with patience and maternal care. Those around her saw only a gentle, joyful nun, not a visionary, not a miracle worker, just a woman content with ordinary service. And yet, within her, a secret fire burned. Each year, on the night of February 22nd, 23, she disappeared quietly from her dormitory. No one saw her, but the sisters knew where she went: into a hidden corner of the convent, dressed in her festive habit, spending the night in prayer. Alone with God, she relived the memory of that night in Cernusco, when the Virgin appeared with the child Jesus in tears. For 60 years, this became her rhythm. By day, she was ordinary, a teacher, a seamstress, a companion to students. By night, especially on that sacred anniversary, she was a guardian of a secret greater than herself. Those closest to her sensed there was more to her story. They noticed how her eyes lit up whenever the Virgin Mary was mentioned, how her words grew strange and tender when she spoke of Jesus. But she never revealed the truth. Even in the confessional, she remained silent, believing her vow of obedience extended that far. Imagine the strength it took to see the Virgin, to hear her words, to be healed by her touch, and then to live 6 decades never speaking of it. Most people would have shouted it from rooftops, demanded recognition, written books, or gathered followers. Elisabetta did the opposite. She chose anonymity, hiddenness, obedience. In this silence, she became a different kind of witness. Not the dramatic prophet, but the hidden saint. Not the voice crying out, but the quiet presence reminding others of God's love through her patience, kindness, and humility. The Virgin's words, entrusted to her lips, "Jesus weeps because he is not loved enough," became not a speech she gave but a truth she lived. Every stitch of her embroidery, every kind word to a student, every quiet prayer at night became her way of answering those tears. The miracle had shaken an entire community. But the silence that followed shaped a soul into something even more extraordinary. A woman who lived not for glory, not for attention, but for God alone. The decades slipped by quietly. While the world outside was shaken by wars, revolutions, and cultural upheavals, Sister Elisabetta Redali lived in simplicity. To those who met her, she was a gentle nun, devoted to teaching girls, sewing, and guiding others with quiet kindness. She never drew attention to herself, never sought recognition. But within her, the memory of that February night remained alive. Each year, she faithfully kept her hidden vigil, silently honoring the visit of the Virgin and the tears of the child Jesus. For 60 years, her secret burned like an unextinguished candle. To the young girls she taught, she was more than an instructor, she was a maternal figure. They loved her gentle presence, her way of speaking with clarity and warmth, her ability to make each student feel noticed. To her fellow sisters, she was a companion whose very silence carried weight, a woman whose eyes seemed to shine with a light no illness or sorrow could extinguish. By the early 1980s, Elisabetta was elderly. Her body, which had once been broken and then restored, now grew frail again with age. But this time there was no fear, no despair. Instead, she radiated peace. When illness returned, she accepted it with gratitude, as though every suffering was one more chance to unite herself with Christ. In 1984, her final illness came. As the priest entered her room to administer the anointing of the sick, her face lit up with gratitude. She whispered again and again, "Thank you, thank you." Every sacrament, every prayer was received as though it were a caress from heaven. On April 4th, 1984, Mass was celebrated in her room. Those present felt an unusual stillness, a deep peace, as though heaven itself bent near. The following morning, April 5th, Sister Elisabetta passed away gently. Her lips, moments before still murmuring, "Thank you," froze into a final smile. She left the world as she had lived in it, humble, grateful, hidden. After her death, her story slowly resurfaced. Though she had been forbidden to speak, others began piecing together the miracle she had carried in silence for so long. Locally, she became associated with Our Lady of the Weeping Child, Madonna del Divin Pianto. In Cernusco, where the Virgin appeared to her, the faithful continued to gather in prayer, remembering that night when heaven touched earth. Those who knew her did not remember her only as the woman of the miracle, but as someone whose entire life radiated humility, gentleness, and hidden holiness. The Virgin had chosen a nun of no fame, no power, no learning, precisely because her silence would make the message shine more brightly than her own name. And so, when her sisters remembered her, they spoke not of grandeur, but of simplicity. A smile, a prayer, a quiet service. Yet behind that ordinary life was a secret greater than herself. A message meant not just for her time, but for every generation to come. Nearly a century has passed since that February night in Cernusco. The convent walls have changed, the world outside has transformed, but the message entrusted to Sister Elisabetta remains as piercing as ever. Jesus weeps because he is not loved enough, not sought, not desired enough, even by those consecrated to him. These words were not meant for one nun alone. They were not limited to the Italy of 1924. They reach across time, across cultures, across every heart that dares to listen. Think of it. The child Jesus, God made flesh, who came to heal, to save, to love, weeping. Not for lack of power, not for the sins of the world alone, but because love is withheld. Because indifference is stronger than devotion. Because even those called to belong to him often forget the fire of their first love. Is this not the same struggle we see today? In a world buzzing with distraction, where God is often treated as an afterthought, how many hearts truly desire him? How many even pause to pray, to listen, to seek his presence? The Virgin's message is not dramatic, not complicated, not wrapped in apocalyptic visions. It is heartbreakingly simple. He longs for love, and that love cannot be replaced by rituals alone or by words without heart. It requires sincerity, the small acts of devotion, the hidden sacrifices, the choices made in silence that say, "You are first in my life." Sister Elisabetta understood this. She did not shout her miracle to the world. She lived it. She embodied it in humility, obedience, and quiet service. She answered the tears of Christ, not with fame, but with fidelity. And that is why her life still speaks, because it shows us that the greatest witness is not always in what is proclaimed, but in what is lived. For those who hear this story today, the challenge is clear. Will we be content with indifference, with treating faith as routine? Or will we respond to the Virgin's call to truly love, to seek, to desire Christ with all our hearts? The answer need not be grand. It begins in the ordinary, in prayer whispered in the morning, in kindness offered to the overlooked, in silence where love is chosen over resentment. These small acts, multiplied across countless lives, are the drops of love that wipe away the tears of the child Jesus. When Sister Elisabetta died in 1984, her final words were simple. "Thank you, thank you." She left the world as she had lived in it, grateful, humble, hidden. And yet, through her, a message meant for all of us continues to echo. So remember this. Miracles may be silenced, names may be forgotten, but the truth of heaven cannot be erased. The Virgin's words remain. Jesus weeps because he is not loved enough. It is a call not just to know him, but to love him. Not just to follow him, but to desire him. Not just to speak of him, but to live for him. And if we answer that call, if we choose love, day by day, quietly, faithfully, then perhaps, even now, The tears of the child Jesus will be turned into joy.